Well, we've been talking a lot about this idea of people going into self-quarantine if they have or have been exposed to COVID-19. But what does that really mean, and how should you prepare for self-quarantine? We talk about the shopping for stuff, and that is really what this is about, right?
Yeah. So this idea of self-quarantine, that if perhaps you were exposed to somebody or if you've traveled internationally, that's where the 14 days comes in, that they ask you to stay inside your home. So there are some things that you're going to need there when you do that.
For sure, and so that's why they've asked people to go ahead and make sure you have like 14 days worth of groceries, because you might have to self-quarantine and then you don't have time to go.
Right.
That's different from like this self-isolation idea.
If you are sick, that's a very different idea from the self-isolation. When you are sick, if you have tested sick for COVID-19, or you're actually, even at the Minnesota Department of Health says, if you come into contact with somebody at a close range for a long time, they're asking that you do not leave your house in those cases. But people who are self-quarantining, that's not going on ride shares, not going on buses, not going on taxis, not going out to the grocery store.
You stay at home. You're in your own bed.
In your own bed is important. That's one of the recommendations there.
Yep, because they don't want you in another bed. But they do say you should use a separate bathroom if you're self-quarantined, and you should wear a face mask when you're around others. The self-quarantine thing is very controversial, though. I don't know if you've read much about the different way that China has handled this versus Italy.
Well, yeah.
And in Italy, people are going home when they're like, okay, you've got COVID-19, go home and self-quarantine.
But they were with their family.
And they're getting their families sick.
Right.
Whereas in China, it was a much more aggressive approach where if you're diagnosed, you're put in isolation.
Right, exactly. Another thing which you saw probably over the weekend, rallies, people are asking, well, what can I watch on Netflix? What books can I read? Because that is a long time to be by yourself.
Right, and that's the thing is, you know, people, we were trying to face the same thing too, you know, with the kids and stuff, watching things, and I feel like, you know, you see it on social media, people are like, I've already watched the season. I've already watched everything that I need to with it, you know, so it's trying to find different things to do, I guess, what you can. Read a lot of books.
I had a friend joke on Instagram. She was saying, this should now be a good time for a study to come out that says screen time is actually really good.
It's good for you, yeah. So I brought up the tape measure because the other thing we're talking about is social distancing. That's another one. And we wanted to show you what 6 feet looks like.
It's about as tall as me.
You might think like 6 feet
it's further than you think.
It's pretty far.
Yeah.
So it's like here.
Right.
So look at that. Like, that's pretty far. So if you're keeping that social distance, it's kind of Minnesotan. Keep your distance.
Keep your distance.
Well, it's don't go up and do that.
That's right.
What is funny, though, is when I meet people or I've talked to people over the weekend, we pause a little bit because neither of us are shaking hands. So it's a weird thing, and I wonder if that's going to change shaking hands in the future.
Well, sorry. I was
no, that's all right. We have a little breaking news that I want to let everybody know about.
We just learned within the last few minutes that the Supreme Court is postponing arguments on its latest cases. This is, of course, because of the coronavirus outbreak. So that's just another move that people are taking to be safe.